Now, yeah, I understand that. I read the papers, I know what's going on in the world, and there's lots of violence out there. However, I'd like to offer you an invitation, I guess you could say, to have a look at not the papers or Iraq or other places in the world where violence is going on, not hand-chopping in Saudi Arabia or anything like that, but have a look at the world that you live in, the world that you exist in. And I bet you, dollars to donuts, that you don't have any violence in your life. Now, okay, let's say some exceptions, just stuff that's common, like maybe you'll spank your kids, or maybe you yell at your wife or your husband from time to time. But I'm not talking about, spanking. I mean, I disagree with it, but let's not get into that right now either. And I'm also not talking about yelling at your wife. I think that's also a very bad thing to do, and of course my wife and I never do that with each other, which is not to say we don't disagree, but it's very civil, it's very pleasant. But we're, compared to something like war, compared to like 100,000 Iraqis murdered, compared to, planes going into towers, spanking and yelling is really not violence compared to all of that kind of stuff. So, to look at your own life and say, okay, well, did I get my job by holding a gun to someone's head? Well, unless, somebody from the Sopranos mindset is listening to this, which I highly doubt, then I'm betting that you didn't get your job by holding a gun to someone's head. Did you force your wife to marry you? Did you force your husband to do? If your kids disagree with you or act up or whatever, I mean, if they're disrespectful to you, do you pull out the brass knuckles and really pound them into a pulp? I bet you don't. When your friends disagree with you, tempers might flare, but I bet you all refrain from beating each other senseless. I bet you that you live a life that is free of violence, that there is no violence in, other than, you got to pay your taxes and, you get pulled over for speeding and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I'm just talking in your life. You do not experience any violence. So when people say to me, pacifism can't work, anarchy can't work, everybody says so much violence and blah blah blah, and if people don't want to be violent, all the violent people will take over and so on, I just don't find that at all credible. I mean, I've known thousands of people in my life. My wife has known thousands of people. She's treated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Violence doesn't really happen. Yeah, I know people get stopped on the street and somebody will hit them and some this and that and the other. But I tell you, that violence is all completely avoidable. I mean, I've never had anybody mug me in my life. Okay, once when I was 11, I guess somebody, said, give me your lunch money or whatever, right? Not exactly the end of the world as I knew it. But I've never been in a fist fight. I've never known anybody who's been in a fist fight. I've never known anybody to hit anybody else. I have never known any of this to occur. And I don't know anybody with whom this has occurred. And it's not like I grew up in some kind of gated community where I just didn't know any bad people. Of course I did. I mean, I grew up in a pretty bad neighborhood and I had a pretty violent family. But nonetheless, I just don't know that many people who use violence. Even the cops that I've talked to don't like using violence. I mean, they're full of bizarre illusions about the good that they're doing and the need for their services, and the fact that, they're not thugs is somehow defined for them in a way that makes them comfortable, but they still don't like using violence. So what I'm trying to say is that a world without violence, a world where violence just is not part of people's social interaction, is absolutely and entirely possible,